So it's kind of like this shady back corner that I grew it in, and it was a total fail. I'm drowning in them and I kind of regret planting them. Today I am spilling the dirt on the 6 plants that I grew this year that aren't gonna make it back into my garden in 2025. Plus, I am going to tell you the one plant that I grew this year for the first time ever that I'm already obsessed with, that I can't wait to bring back in 2025. I did make a mistake growing it, and I'm going to talk about it in this video today, so make sure you stick around for that. And finally, one of these plants is probably something that you grow and you might already love it, but it'll be, in my 10 years of gardening, this will be the first time that I'm kicking it out of my garden because I'm done with it. And so you're going to want to stick around to the end to get to know which plant that is. What's up? My name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada, and I garden in Ottawa Zone 5. We have all been here before as gardeners. We love to try new varieties and new plants, especially anything that is trendy on the internet, like loofahs, which I've grown a couple years ago, and some of them work out and some of them don't. So I'm going to take you through the 6 duds from my garden, and the first one is Napa cabbage. I love to buy this from the farmer's market, so I thought, why wouldn't I just grow it myself, so that way I don't have to keep buying it and spending my money. And I happened to get some seeds from West Coast Seeds, and so I was like, this must be a sign I'm gonna grow it. And so I grew it and it turned into heads of cabbage, but since I'd never grown it before, I didn't really know how big it would get, and I planted it in this one corner of my garden and I just jammed them in there, and so they were totally overpacked in one space. They didn't really grow to their full size, and it was a part of my garden that I just don't really like to be in. We took a shed down from over there, so it's kind of like this shady back corner that I grew it in, and it was a total fail. The plants grew, I could have harvested them, but every time I walked over there, it was this like weedy corner. There were fruit flies all over the plants, which was weird. And I also got these like rotting portions to the leaf. I was just really grossed out by these plants, and I don't think it was the plants' fault. I think it was where I planted them, how I planted them, how I was caring for them. But I don't think I'm gonna give Napa cabbage a go again. Maybe I'll try it one more time and I'll only plant 1 or 2 seeds just to see. But the idea of the rotting parts of the leaves and the fruit flies all over it, I just don't know if Napa cabbage is for me or my garden. So it came and it went all in a single season. The second one is super hot peppers. This is also the first time that I've ever grown them, was this year. And these plants didn't fail, they actually did too good. And so my problem was that I didn't realize how much a single super hot pepper plant can produce. And let me tell you, one plant produces so many fruit pods, and I planted 10 plants. So they took up a ton of space, and they became this plant that I just like dreaded going outside for, because it was loaded with peppers and I had to harvest them, and I had literally didn't know what to do with them. Like, I had so many, and they were so hot that I bit one once and I've chickened out ever since. And the thing is, I like spicy food, and my partner and I got caught up in a Disney Plus documentary on super hot peppers and people who compete by eating super hots. And so we thought it would be the coolest thing ever to grow these super hot peppers. And it turned out that I should have planted only 1 or 2 plants. They took up a ton of space in the garden, and I literally am drowning in hot peppers in my freezer because I went away on vacation in October, so I literally had to harvest everything and I didn't know what to do with it. So they're sitting in the freezer and I'm not really sure what my plan is. And I have maybe like 6 jars minimum of dehydrated super hot peppers. So I have a mix of my freezer's full of peppers, my pantry's full of dehydrated peppers. I'm drowning in them, and I kind of regret planting them. So next year, they are getting the boot. I don't need any more hot peppers. I have enough to last me a lifetime, and that space is going to be used for maybe some jalapenos or some nice mild bell peppers that I actually eat on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so the next one is onions. I've been planting them in my garden for at least 5 years now, and I really don't want to give up on these, but they have failed me every single year, no matter how hard I try. So I have tried to grow onions from seeds. I've grown onions from sets. I've bought onion seeds from local seed suppliers in hopes that the variety of onion was good for Ottawa's growing weather. And every single year I have failed at onions. And I absolutely do not want to give up on growing onions, but they are coming out and they're pathetic. They're like the size of a golf ball. And so if you are good at growing onions and you live in Canada or any northern area, I would love to get your onion growing tips. If you can leave them in the comments below, because I desperately want onions to work so that way we can save some money on groceries, since we eat a lot of onions and they can be stored over the winter. They're like the perfect crop, deters pests, and yeah, I just can't grow them, so I will take any advice from anyone. But otherwise, at some point, I'm just gonna have to give up on onions. Not only are they hard to grow, but their seeds only last a year or two and then they lose viability. So I can't keep buying seeds for plants that are just failing. And so sadly, onions are going to have to go. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but I built this really cool interactive tool. It's a garden planner specifically for square foot gardening, which is the way that I like to garden. And so I am gonna put some onions into this tool just for this one last year. I'm gonna give it one more shot. And so I will put it in the link below if you're interested, in a little visual up here so you can see it. But what you do is you can pick out whatever you're hoping to plant and put it inside of this garden. And it's gonna tell you how many plants you can fit in a square foot, while it's also building a list on the side of it. So that way, when the time comes to plant your seeds or to budget for seedlings, you know exactly how many you need to plant or buy. Okay, so my next one is red celery. And I am not a fan of celery when it comes to buying it from the grocery store, but I grew it last year for the first time ever. It was a variety called Utah. It's a green celery, and I absolutely was obsessed. Like, I loved grabbing some from the garden and snacking on it with hummus. It was such a great plant, and it turns out they're super cold hardy because my red celery that I have is still surviving, and we're into the middle of November now. And so I bought this red variety because I thought it was really cool to get celery that was red. And I'm always looking for varieties that you don't find at the grocery store, as all of us gardeners do. And so I picked out this red celery. I grew both the green celery and the red celery from seed this past spring, but I had a massive infestation of flying aphids in my seedlings this spring. It was literally the worst experience ever. And so the aphids took over my green celery and killed it all before it ever made it into the garden. But luckily my red celery survived, which was great since it was a new variety that I wanted to bring into the garden. And unfortunately, this red celery is not as good. And there's a reason why sometimes things aren't found at the grocery store. So this red celery has a really nice taste to it, but the stalks are really thin and they're hollow on the inside, so you don't get quite that same like juicy, crunchy snack feeling when you're eating the green celery that you get at the grocery store. And they're a little stringy, so you don't really want to be just eating them fresh off the stalk. They taste really good chopped up and put into a salad, so I'm super glad for that. So they weren't totally wasted, but they just didn't give that same snacking feeling that you get with other celery. And then, so what I found was that I would just walk past the celery in the garden and I would never harvest it. I didn't really look at it, but I didn't want to rip it out because I didn't want to, in case, I didn't want to rip it out just in case I wanted to eat it or when the time came. And so it took up a ton of space in my garden, and I could have used this for other things, or sadly, I could have just bought seedlings, celery seedlings from the grocery store or from a nursery, but I didn't do that. And so the red celery was goodish, but not good enough, and it wasted up some space in my garden. So out it goes for 2025. Okay, next up is an herb, and that is oregano. I've been growing this for maybe 4 years now, and I'm super sick of it. I've tried a couple different varieties now, but I find that my oregano that I'm growing just doesn't have that like spice or that really strong taste that you get from some of the dried oreganos. And I know that's variety specific, but I just haven't found the variety I want. And not only that, but I have found that it just literally takes over my garden, and I don't love that. It's super hard to harvest because it's this low-lying leafy plant, and so you have to like pull all the leaves off the stem, and then because it walks along the ground like it's crawling on the soil, when we get really heavy rainstorms here in Ottawa, the soil splashes back and they are just so dirty. And they're like little fuzzy leaves-ish, so it's like they just hold on to that dirt like insanely well. So even if you put it in a bowl of water, it's impossible to clean it. And so I'm just getting tired of my oregano taking over my garden. I'm not harvesting it. It's a lot of work to dehydrate it for the winter. It doesn't have a great flavor, and it's just so dirty. And so I'm pretty sure I'm gonna rip it all out fully and start fresh, and I'm not gonna have oregano for next year. Okay, and here is the last one that's getting kicked out for next year, and that is strawberries. I have had strawberries in my garden for like 8 years now, and I'm so sick of them. I built these 2 gardens that have cold frames on top of them because the strawberries do better when they're protected over the winter, so they can bounce back better in the springtime. And I bought, thankfully, about 8 strawberry plants last 2 falls ago, and they were like $2 a pot, so I'm so glad that I bought them on discount, because otherwise I would have wasted so much money on these. And I planted 4 of them in each of my cold frames, and over last winter I had a vole eat all of the roots of one of my cold frames, and I lost every single strawberry plant in that cold frame. And then in my other cold frame, a couple of the plants survived, but anytime I get any type of fruit ripening, a mouse or a slug gets to it before I do. And so I'll go out there and I'll see an almost ripe strawberry, and the next day I come back, either the strawberry is fully gone or there's slug holes that they've eaten it overnight. And I'm tired of growing strawberries where I think I'm gonna be getting some fruit, and I'm so excited, and then I go out there and it's all been taken away from me. I don't like that it invites mice into my yard. I don't really care that I only get 1 or 2 berries a year. It feels like a total waste of time. And so I'm ripping those strawberries out. Maybe I'll see if someone down the street from me wants any strawberries to grow, but they are heading out of my garden. I might even bring them to the allotment and like feed the mice at the allotment. I don't know. So I'm getting rid of them, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but they're going, and I'm just gonna keep my raspberries because my raspberries are way lower maintenance, make way more fruit, and they bring me so much more joy. So I do want to tell you about the one plant that I did bring in this year that I'm obsessed with, and that is sweet potatoes. I grew these from slips, and if you're interested in growing your own sweet potatoes, I will link that video at the end of this video for you to follow through and watch the next video on how to grow slips, because I'm going to be starting them in a couple months around the beginning of February, and I just absolutely love them. I think growing any kind of potato is a complete joy, and sweet potatoes are part of that joy. And so what I really loved about them is just you never know what you're gonna get under the surface. And I got 2 baking trays worth of sweet potatoes, and I grew, I think, 4 or 5 slips. I had grown significantly more slips, but they got mealybugs on them, and I just wasn't in the right headspace during the springtime last year, so I let a lot of my slips die. And I am not doing that this year. I'm gonna try and pack in as many slips as I can get. And we've made some really good meals with them. I grew the purple Stokes potatoes, and you just want to make sure they're organic, and I grabbed mine from Whole Foods, and it was just so cool to cut them open, and they're like the most vibrant purple that you've ever seen, and they're just really fun to grow. So I did make one major mistake when I was planting them, and that was that I thought, oh, this is great. The vines are gonna make a living mulch, and so I'm gonna mix them in with my other plants. so that way they can create a living mulch over the soil, which keeps the soil cooler and stops rain or any watering from evaporating, so it keeps the soil moist for longer. But one of the issues with that is that I planted it with ground cherries, and the thing with ground cherries, hence their name, is that when the fruit is ripe, it drops to the ground. But now I had this living mulch over top of the soil, so I couldn't find any of my fruit. And the squirrels had the perfect hideaway for them to come into my garden and eat all of the ground cherries before I could even find them. So it was a mistake to be planting a ground cover with a plant that relies on dropping its ripe fruit on the ground. So I'm not going to do that again. And then the other thing is making sure that wherever I plant the sweet potatoes, that when I go to dig them up, that the other plants that are planted around it are done too. And so I harvested my sweet potatoes in September, but the plants that I had them with, the ground cherries, the Swiss chard, and the eggplant, were all still producing. And so I didn't know how to dig up these potatoes without killing the other plants, which is why next year I'm gonna plant my sweet potatoes all on their own, and I'm not gonna mix them up with anything. So that is how I'm gonna take my sweet potatoes into 2025. And so those are all the plants that I am not going to be growing next year, and I'm sure you have a few plants that you've experienced the same with. So if you just want to let me know in the comments below what plants you've tried to grow either last year or in previous years that you went, this is not for my garden. So if you just want to leave it in the comments below, I can't wait to read them, and you can help others learn what is good and what isn't. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.